All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I wanted to do just a couple of little hodgepodge things before we get into a lesson today, and I hope the lesson will be useful and productive. It may actually be a repeat for some of you that are a little bit older, but we do have some brand new people and some folks that are about to go into their first or maybe second or third closing. And so we're going to cover the topic of the actual closing and preparing for the closing, which is going to be particularly applicable. Lori's going to go with me tomorrow on one for shadowing. And Lori, you can thank your friend and mentor and coach Tracy, who reminded me that you were looking for an opportunity. So thank you, Tracy. Looking out for each other. And this is a perfect opportunity to I love this part of our business where we're all helping each other and we're seeing things happen.
Yeah. Thank you, Tracy.
And to that effect, some of you were in the practice session this morning. Who here has seen the email from Real Scout and done anything with it yet? Okay, you done anything with it yet? Anybody played with it yet? Okay. Yeah. Tracy has, Lanier has. I got on there and at least set up my profile so far, and it took me about 10 minutes to do. So it's not difficult. It's not cosmic. One of my major projects this weekend is to load a bunch of my clients in there. I also am seeing the utility in this, and I'm going to be using it for my personal business. So if that tells you anything, I hope it does. So. And one of the best features about Real Scout, and I think I can get some amens here if I really play this right. Who here has been frustrated with the fact that we have two MLSs in the state of Georgia, in Atlanta? And on the one hand, you have to know FMLS because that's where we live and that's the major foothold. But for those of us that do any business south of Interstate 20, you pretty much need Georgia MLS too. And if you want to set your people up on a search, it's difficult at best to do because you don't do it enough to be proficient at it. But the beauty of this system is Real Scout. You can set them up on a search for both FMLS and Georgia MLS, cover 100% of the available homes in a particular area, and you only have to use one system to do it, Real Scout. Okay, and your clients will thank you and appreciate it, and appreciate you for connecting them on that. So the major training is next week, but like I said, if you want to get in there and play around with it, there's some great tutorials that they have on their site, and it's really, really helpful and really, really productive. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Wonderful. All right. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, and this is preemptive, and following your feedback from last week, I kind of agree with you. I wanted to do something other than Moxie because I think we need a little bit of a palate cleanser today. And the major training is rolling out. But I mentioned to everybody yesterday in the Connect Wednesday session to watch your some of the training is available even before we roll out Moxie on August 15th. I want to show you how to access that and how to take advantage of it. And why do I not have? Where is my? Go ahead.
So is Moxie officially not going to be turned on though till the 15th? So like
that is correct.
Got it.
And that is, less than ideal, but it is a systems issue for the reasons why it can't be turned on until we're 100% tech ready to be able to do that.
Okay.
I am going to put in the chat box very quickly here. Hang on, I'm going to find the URL. I'm going to show you guys from the chat box. Sorry guys, my cursor is not wanting to cooperate today. Here we go. I'm going to put a URL in the chat box. This is for training. If you wanted to take advantage of some training prior to the rollout for Moxie, this is how you can take advantage of that. All right. And if you hold on for just a second, I'm also going to share my screen and we're going to go to the link together and we'll play around with it for a little bit. Okay, is everybody looking at my screen right now? Okay, that link will take you to this. This is the training schedule and basically the how to get on webinars. So we are in group 3 of the rollout for all of Century 21. And what I want to point out to you is this little section right here for under agent training and registering under C21. There are 4 major trainings dealing with the 4 different modules within C21. Within the Moxie rollout or within the Century 21 rollout of Moxie, if I can get my words to come out of my mouth. Okay, so you can simply come into here, and if you want to learn about Moxie Present, you can hit register. And what you will see is there are a number of sessions. Actually, these are all the ones that are August 15th. After the rollout, but if you wanted to do one before, let me show you where they are. See these leadership orientations? These are basically some of the same trainings, but you can sign up for these prior to the August 15th date. Okay. All right.
Is there one that you've taken that you? Oh,
I've been doing I'm actually working on all of them. I think I've done Engage, I've done Present, and I think I need to do Leads Engine and websites. So they're all very good.
Okay.
Okay. And they just scratch the surface, to be honest with you, because there's so much within this, but there are a lot of little bite-sized 3-minute tutorials that can teach you a very specific task within Moxie Engage. So there's some really, really good tools and tutorials within that. Okay. And I will post that that link other than just in the chat. I'll also post it so you guys can access it on Workspace. All right. Any questions? Don't see any hands. We're going to roll right into what could be review for some. Hopefully, good information for the new folks. And I'm going to share my screen, and well, we're going to go to here. Okay, and for some reason, it's not sharing on the right screen. Hang on. All right, everybody looking at preparing for the closing now? Okay. All right, so let's just roll right into this, and we're going to talk about the actions and things that we're going to do. We're going to kind of break this down based off of the timeline. All right, so we're going to do the stuff that we're going to focus in on the week prior to the closing, then the day prior to the closing. We're going to talk a little bit about setting expectations with your client, then the actual process of reading the closing disclosure or the ALTA statement. And then we're going to talk about what we do at the closing and then after the closing. So it's all just neatly organized into a timeline for y'all. Okay. So the week prior to the closing. All right. So just as a reminder, at this point, what we have done is we've gone under contract. We have gone through due diligence. We have created and negotiated repairs on the amendment to address concerns. And we have gone through financing appraisal and appraisal contingencies. And we are basically just twiddling our thumbs waiting for the closing. So we're going to talk about the actions that we take during this week prior to that closing. So first thing we got to do is we got to make sure that any of the repairs that we negotiated for and agreed to upon in the amendment to address concerns and or the appraisal have been completed. Okay, so somebody tell me the scenario where a repair for appraisal is a possibility.
Is that with FHA?
It is most prevalently found in FHA. It could also be VA. I hate to tell you this, doesn't happen very often, but it also can be an issue on a conventional. I've had one of my conventional loans in all of the transactions that I've been doing this in this business for 7+ years, that actually had repairs on a conventional loan. Wasn't a bad house. I don't know if that particular appraisal got up on the wrong side of the bed that particular day, but we did have to do repairs on a conventional. So it is possible that your appraisal is subject to a certain amount of repairs. Okay, so we have to verify that. And with the ATAC, it's your responsibility. The amendment to address concerns.
On I-285 and in a quarter of a mile.
Why
You're
do I have
still
so
on the
much
fastest
audio?
route.
Who's muted? Somebody mute. Okay. So the 8th Amendment to address concerns is your responsibility to make sure the repairs are done. If the appraiser has required repairs to be done, he is responsible for it. But you need to know that because you need to budget some additional time in there. So if the appraisal is subject to repairs, it has to be, the appraiser has to go back out to view the property to verify that the repairs are done. Okay. So what you want to do is most of the time you're going to use in your amendment to address concerns that what you should do is you want to verify by reviewing any receipts or invoices from repairs that were done by a contractor at the home. So if you've said in your amendment to address concerns that the seller will have a licensed HVAC company do repairs on the upstairs unit, then you want to request, if you haven't gotten it organically, you're going to have to get with the listing agent and say, hey, I need to see those repairs that were done. Or if you are the selling agent, you need to provide those repair invoices to your buyer co-op agent. Okay. The week prior, you are now needing to start confirming date, time of the closing appointment. Help desk will do this for you, and they will prompt if they don't have dates and times already. But it's always a good idea to make sure that you're deconflict those dates and times with your clients. Okay. And you can also provide a map and directions to your client for where the closing is at. Quite often, the closing attorney's offices will spoon feed you with that information if you need it. Okay. Contact the lender and check the status of the loan the week prior to the closing. And I would do this if I'm representing the buyer, and by golly, I'm going to do it if I'm representing the seller too, or at least if I'm not reaching out to the lender for the buyer, I'm reaching out to their agent to say, hey, does everything look okay on their loan? That's a big part of your job, is making sure that everything goes through. All right. And then you want to obtain and provide your utility provider's information sheet from the seller, and make sure you forward it to your buyer. And the buyer, of course, is responsible for setting up their services and do so effective on the closing date. If you're representing the seller in this scenario, you want to tell them you need to make sure you have your utilities remain on until the day of the closing. Ideally, I typically advise my clients the day after, just to have that buffer margin. Contractually, they're only required to do it the day of. Any questions so far? Okay. Also on that week prior, you're going to verify the closing disclosure has been sent. Okay. So received and signed by the buyer no later than 3 days prior to the closing. What are we verifying compliance with in this case? Does anybody know what the federal law is that we're complying with when we do this process?
It's the TILA, right? It's the truth in lending. You have to make sure nothing's changed. Is that one?
It actually, well, that's actually part of the bigger picture. It's actually RESPA, the real estate settlement. What does the P stand for? I'm having a brain cramp all of a sudden. Y'all know what RESPA stands for. But it requires that the borrower have 3 days to review the financial statement and to verify that prior to the closing. You just don't want any surprises. When I first bought my house in Georgia, I had no idea what the final numbers looked like until I showed up at the closing table. Granted, that was before I was in real estate, because this law didn't exist at that time. All right. So 3 days prior to the closing. So you also want to prepare your client for this. Is they need to know that when they get that from their lender, that they need to turn it around, sign it, review it, ask the questions that they need to ask, and return it signed to their lender as quickly as possible. The next step is you want to make sure that the closing attorney, and for that matter, even before the closing attorney, our help desk has everything that they need, all of the amendments, any of the contract documents, the instructions to the closing attorney, which is your commission confirmation agreement. All of that has to be done. If you have been receiving any pings or notifications from either the help desk or specifically from Karen to provide documents, this is what it's for. Because you can't close and you will not get a pay at close until such time as we are 100% compliance. And that's not because it's Big Brother trying to be, the 100-pound gorilla or the 800-pound gorilla in the room. It's simply because we're trying to take care of you, your clients, and make sure that you don't go to real estate jail. Okay. A day or two prior, verify that the attorney has the loan package from the lender. Usually you'll hear this the day before, sometimes the day of. Okay. But they have to have that from the lender in order to be able to close. So it's always a good idea to just double check. Early in the game, you want to make sure and verify that all the parties will be present at the closing. Is somebody going to be gone? Do we need to do a mail away because they've already left for Florida? Do we do a power of attorney to have the husband sign for the wife who can't make it because of something? Okay, those are the things that are all within the realms of possibility, but easily managed. But you need to know ahead of time before, in order to be able to respond to it. And of course, you need to shop for that closing gift and start thinking about what you're going to do for your client. Okay. I'm a big fan of the board and brush stuff. In fact, ta-da, that's for our closing tomorrow, Lori. All right. Now let's talk about setting the expectations with your client. You absolutely should be having a conversation with your client. They don't go to closings all the time like you do. They go to 1, maybe 2, 3, 4 in a lifetime. You do this 2, 3, 4, hopefully times a month. All right. So you need to set the expectations. You're their guide to this process. You do this all the time. You want to make it sound like it's no big deal, and that you've got everything under control. Okay. Make sure they're looking out for that closing disclosure the 3 days prior, and sign it as quickly and return it as quickly as possible. We already talked about that. Talk to them about the final walk of the purpose of it and the process. All right. And then we're going to schedule that final walk either the day of or the day prior to the actual closing. All right. And I'm a big fan of day of as opposed to day prior. Okay. And I'll tell you why. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Explain that there can be an ever so slight difference between the closing cost estimate from the lender and the final closing cost that we get from the closing attorney. So when they get the closing disclosure from the lender, it might say that they need $10,000 for funds to close, and they may be preparing for that. Then the lender turns it over to the closing attorney. The closing attorney discovers there's some kind of water bill or some kind of a fee that needs to be paid, or an HOA fee that needs to be paid. And it might end up being $10,500. Okay. That's understandable. It's normal. And we just need to be prepared for it. So if they've wire transferred their money already, they might want to think about bringing a checkbook to the closing in case there is an ever so slight difference. All right. And then immediately prior to the closing, they want to make sure that they have the funds needed to close, whatever that amount was that they said they were needed. Your client is going to have to typically wire transfer that to the closing attorney to make it possible. So you just need to facilitate that. You don't want to be the person passing on the wiring instructions. Okay, let's have a conversation about this. Do we have enough time? I think we have enough time. Do you ever want to be the one emailing wiring instructions to anybody? Why?
Bank fraud.
Yeah, fraud.
Exactly. Yep. Oh gosh, we got banking people in the building here. Absolutely. So never be the one to email somebody wiring instructions because it is wrought with fraud. All right. It should only come through a secure portal, and caution your clients, never wire funds and until you have coordinated with and through me and the closing attorney, because I'm going to protect you and I'm going to make sure you don't wire funds. I am personally aware of a little old lady who was buying a piece of property or selling a piece of property, was told you can't close until you wire $80,000. The woman wired her life savings as an elderly woman, and that money was gone. $80,000. Don't let that be you. Okay. Okay. Back. Okay. And so you want to facilitate all of that, make sure that wire transfer is going through, and then just be there. What questions do you have about the closing? Is there any, steps to the process that you don't understand at this point? All right. And then you want to be setting those expectations with their clients. You remember, you're their guide to the process. Make sure they're looking out for that. Oh, I'm sorry. My slide didn't move forward. There we go. So the help desk can help you with your brokerment tasks and making sure that all the documents are there and all the tasks have been completed. If your file is in compliance, they'll issue the CDA, which is also known as the pay at close, the commission distribution authorization. So at Century 21, we'd like to see you walk away from the closing table with a check in your hand, a check for you, and then a check for the brokerage. We don't make you wait for it. You get paid right away. But it is very simple to log into your brokerment account and look to see if you have any outstanding tasks under a file. Okay, and this is the way you do that. You go to your contract to close, and you are likely to see tasks that have been crossed off. If it doesn't have that check mark, then it's outstanding, and you still need to finish it up. Okay. The day prior to that closing, you may have already received it. If you haven't, you're going to want to request a copy of the closing disclosure or the ALTA from the closing attorney's office. The main things that you want to look for on there are that the commissions are correct, and that your clients, what funds needed to close or the funds that they're going to receive after the closing are all correct. And you're going to have to just kind of look on there. You may not know the numbers exactly, but you want to look to make sure that nothing has been omitted, like things like a home warranty, or they have the commissions incorrect, something along those lines. If Century 21 has been the holder of the earnest money, we will go through the process to make sure that that earnest money check has been sent to the closing attorney for your closing. And that's usually happening the day of or the day prior to the closing. Okay. Any questions on that? Yeah.
I have a question. Maybe it's in the next slide, but when you talk about the walkthrough, I recently had a walkthrough when we did the day of, and there are obviously paintings in the wall that the sellers removed because they're moving. And my buyer was like, hey, there's holes in the wall. And my question is, what is the practice if someone comes, your buyer comes to you at closing and it's like, hey, there's a bunch of holes and I want these painted or spackled and painted. Can you hold up a closing for that?
Yes, you can, and yes, you should.
Really?
If it is, well, wait. If the home is not in, you're segueing into what we're going to talk about. In fact, put a stick pin in that. We're going to talk about that in just a second.
Sure. Thank you.
So let's move on. So Gosh, it's the next slide. Could this work out any better? All right. So the purpose of the final walk is to verify the home is in quote unquote substantially the same condition as on the binding agreement date. Okay, so let's read that highlighted section. Seller warrants that at the time of the closing of the property and all items remaining with the property, if any, will be in substantially the same condition, including conditions disclosed in the seller's property disclosure statement as on the binding agreement date. Okay, so here's the question is if there were pictures hanging on the wall, were those holes in the wall on the closing date, or were they not on there on the closing date? Or I'm sorry, on the binding agreement date.
My question is, like, if they're in the wall, they're not holes then present on binding agreement date. Sorry, I'm just wondering. I got BS from my client for this, so I want to know what's the best practice here.
So this is.
They were just plugged.
Say again.
The holes were there. They were just plugged with the nails.
They just had a nail in them. They were behind the pictures, so they were there. So here's the kind of things that you typically are looking for. Are you ever going to split hairs over holes in a wall? No. It is understandable. In fact, there might be even language in here for how to handle that situation if you don't. But essentially what you're looking for is that they didn't do any damage when they were moving out, that there's not tears in the linoleum in the kitchen where they removed the refrigerator. There's not holes in the wall where the piano that they removed down the stairs fell through the wall. And God forbid what you see in these pictures is a realistic possibility. Moving trucks can get parked in places where they don't get the emergency brake set, and the next thing you know, you end up with a giant moving truck in the garage. When homes are being moved out of, they frequently will use things like extension cords to run a fan in an area of the house that they never used before. Fires can happen. And if you are representing a client and something like this has happened and you walked to the house the day before the closing and the day of the closing, you didn't see it, and something like this fire happened, you have just helped your client buy a pile of ashes. That is correct. So if I am in a situation where either the demands of my client or the other person's client have dictated that we can't go to the house on the day of, and we end up doing a walk the day before, I make it a point to at least do a drive-by to make sure that you're not looking at something like this burnt pile of ashes that somebody is about to buy. Okay. All right. So when you're performing that final walk, you're visually going to verify all repairs are made and completed as agreed. I typically will use the actual amendment to address concerns and/or the appraisal to physically walk every one of those repairs. And we use that as kind of a checklist to go through and say, okay, well, we had asked for this toilet to be secured because it was rocking. Let's go to that toilet and we're gonna physically do the rocking test. You're gonna look at the hot water heater was supposed to be replaced. You're gonna go look and make sure and verify that the dates on the thing are brand new. You're physically going to use it as a checklist. Okay. You also would want to bring to that final walk a copy of the seller's property disclosure because you're going to verify. Remember, page 7 is that checklist of all the items that are supposed to be there on closing date. You're going to go through and make sure. If there was supposed to be a washer and dryer there, by golly, it better be there. If it's not, we'll talk about that in just a second. You're going to perform that final walk, and you're going to make sure that all that property has been removed. If there was anything on a bill of sale, you want to make sure that it's present and still there. Take photos of the client in front of their front door of their new home for your marketing and your social media. These are some clients of mine about a couple of years ago. You want to perform the final walk. what happens if there is a problem when you that it is identified? You want to notify that co-op agent, take photos of the problem, and then this is where we have to find that solution. And this is where creativity comes into play. You can either buy time by extending the closing. You can get contractors out there. If they left a whole bunch of personal property, you can get a junk hauling service, junk removal, 1-800-truck, whatever the case may be. There's lots of solutions. Okay. If there is no resolution prior to the scheduled closing, then if you give away the leverage that you have in holding up that closing, you're never going to get anything done. Okay. That closing is your only real leverage. Use it to your advantage. Okay. Buyers are not allowed to take possession or start moving in prior to the closing. Don't even, unless it's been granted and authorized, don't even park your car or the moving truck in the driveway. Keep it around the corner at the gas station. Okay. Be on time for the actual closing appointment. Brief your client to bring their ID and their checkbook. Remember, we said we needed it's always a good idea to have that checkbook in case the amounts are slightly different. When you're talking to your client about the actual appointment, set the expectation 1 hour minimum. Depending upon the day of the month and the day within the month, like the last Friday of every month is a big closing date. It might take 2 to 4 hours. It's not uncommon. The big holdup is not on your end or the attorney's end, it's on the lender's end. And if at all possible, leave the kids and the pets at home. It's going to be stressful and chaotic enough. Okay. We have gone overtime, and I apologize. So this is the ALTA, and this is actually the closing disclosure, which looks very similar. This is the actual ALTA form, which is a slightly different format, but the same information. You want to verify that the commissions are correct, do the math, physically calculate it, make sure that the dollar values are correct. If the seller was buying a home warranty, you want to make sure that's reflected on the debit as a seller's debit on there. And any other seller's concessions, the closing costs, anything else that was agreed upon has been taken care of on the closing disclosure. All right. Let's talk about this. If you do personal property and you've agreed to buy a couch, the seller and the buyer have agreed to buy a couch and the dining room table. It's just a good idea to have that because of RESPA and the attorney's responsibility to make sure that there's no side deals going on. They don't even want to hear about the fact that the buyer and the seller have agreed to buy each other's couch and dining room table. So it's just better to have that conversation when the attorney's out of the room. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just better to handle that where they don't have to be even concerned about it. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit more about the seating arrangement. I'm going to post these slides. The attorney will review the CD at the actual closing, get everybody's signatures. They're going to send all those documents off and come back to sign the last things. And then what they're waiting for is the funding approval from the lender's office. Then you're going to exchange the keys and the garage door openers there at the closing. You're going to talk about probably utilities. Don't forget to take pictures for your clients and for your marketing purposes. Everybody wants to see the sold sign. Everybody wants to see the keys being handed to the person. It's a little bit trite. Be careful how you do it. Don't be too obnoxious with them. But then while you're there, take a testimonial video. That's always great. And make sure you're asking your client for either referrals or for a recommendation. So at the closing disclosure, it's the happiest moment of their life. One of them, probably. What a better time to ask for some feedback on an online portal. All right. I have skipped and gone really fast towards the end, and I apologize for that. I'm going to post these slides on Workplace so y'all can take advantage of that. And if there's anything that you would like to review, does anybody have any questions right now? Bring it on. Go ahead.
Real quick, this is a side one. On Real Scout, if we accidentally deleted that email and don't know, is there another, how do we get another one sent? I can't find it.
I'll forward it to you.
All right.
I'll forward it to you. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so Jay, I'm not sure that I understand the answer to his question. So at one point
Okay.
you said you can and you should, but then you said the holes were already there. So I'm not sure what's the
Well, so there is nothing in the contract that requires the buyer to fill holes and paint and patch the walls where pictures have been hung. So there's nothing in the contract that requires that. If your client had that expectation, it's better. We probably would have, should have, could have, would have known about it ahead of time, and probably written a special stip into the contract with that requirement
So-
being specifically outlined.
So can a buyer hold up the closing then if they wanted? But say you explain that to them, but they say, nope, I still don't want to close. But can they actually hold it up?
Theoretically, they probably could. That's where you're going to want to take on a partner with one of your brokerages, one of your brokers, so that we can then get involved and try to coordinate with both sides of the equation, whether or not this is a legitimate reason to hold up the closing or not. Did you get that far? What was your situation?
We went to look at the house. The dad was not there, so it was the son. And me and him looked at it. We were fine.
He was okay.
Yeah, it was like paintings. We're like, all right. He's like, I'll do it myself. And then his dad's become a client also. And so in the process, when I followed up with his dad about another house, he's like, why didn't you get the painting done? He's like, I was like, what do you mean? I was like, and he explained, he's like, it's not in the condition that we have viewed the house. And he said he would have held up closing for the painting. So I kind of was.
So that's where you go. Unfortunately, it's a common misconception that amongst the real estate market, that everything has to be perfect, that the home has to be restored to 100% perfect condition. It's not part of the contract. Unfortunately, I can only enforce what is part of the contract.
And then being fully transparent, since they are both going to become my clients, I offered to paint it myself. I mean, to get it done. I was like, if you want, I'll just paint it for you. So
It's within your purview to do so.
yeah, so
You're a kind gentleman. Not sure I would make the same offer, but you do you, buddy.
I mean, if you heard that dad yelling at me, that dad was pretty furious at me. So
I've been known to do similar things.
I was
All
like,
right.
whatever.
Okay, did that answer your question, Tippy? Did we get it covered?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, everybody have a great day. If anybody has any email issues, we're still here. Corey will be here this afternoon if anybody needs anything beyond the remedial help that I can provide. So let me know if you need anything. Have a great day, everybody.